start with a recap. Do we remember what it was about, the last teaching? Yeah, the resurrection of Lazarus. That's what it was all about. It was about the resurrection of Lazarus in chapter 11. Yeah, good math. We're in 12. It was 11. So it was in chapter 11, and it was all about the resurrection of Lazarus. Good. So now we're going to be diving into 12, and like we always do with me, we're going to read together. So if you go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, there we go. So all the text that is going to be in black, I'm going to be the one reading that. I'm the narrator. And then all the text in blue, which is probably going to be hard to see, but it's everything that is a quote, we're going to read together, okay? Or you're going to read it, not me. It's your turn. All right? So let's get ready to dive into the Word of God. This is in John chapter 12, verse 1 and 11. And it starts, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here, a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pin of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected.
Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages.
He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied.
It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me.
Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. So the first thing that we always see, and this is something that you got to put into your mind, you got to put it right there. Every time you read the Bible, we want to teach you guys how to read the Bible, how to dive into it in your own time of meditation. And so the first thing you got to do is pay attention to the setting. Right? The setting is very important, and usually the authors, they give you a lot of information about what the setting is all about. And the reason that this is important is because the time back then was completely different, right? It was a completely different world with different rules, different laws, a completely different culture. And so if you understand the context, you're actually going to be able to understand what the message is trying to tell you. So there are 4 different things that we see with the setting. The first one is the timeline. Actually, 3 things, not 4. The first one is the timeline, and we learned that there are 6 days before the celebration of the Passover. Now, at this point, we should know what the Passover is, right? You talked about it, Sophie, right? The movie? Yeah. What is the Passover all about? I don't know. Think about the plagues. Sam?
When Moses saved the Israelites from Egypt.
Right? And what was the meaning of it? Why did it become a celebration? Yeah. God was able to free his nation, and it became a celebration because it was a remembrance. It was a day of remembrance about the liberation from Egypt and then going to the promised land. So it was a very big deal. So that's the first thing, is the timeline. We learn about the Passover, and in reality, this is getting closer to Jesus' actual sacrifice, to Jesus' death. So that's the timeline. We're very close to it. Now, the next thing is location, where Jesus is going. Where is he going? To where? Bethany. He's going to Bethany, right, where Lazarus lived. So that's where he's going, and then the event that is happening is a dinner. And this dinner is probably to celebrate the fact that Jesus resurrected Lazarus from the dead. So then in the coming verses, we're going to learn what this event is all about, what the whole context, what's going on. So it says in verse 3, then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So she grabbed this very expensive perfume, and later on we learned that it's actually 300 denarii, some sort of money back then, but it was a year's wage of a person, so very, very expensive. And she takes it, and then she puts it on Jesus' feet to wash his feet. But on top of that, not only does she go and wash his feet, which is a very humbling thing. Like imagine, I don't know if I would ever do something like that. But imagine this, then using her own hair to wash his feet. You know, for the girls here, your hair is very sacred, right? Imagine doing that to a person. That is very, very humbling. You know, something that we cannot even conceive. And that's what Mary does. It's an act of humble and sincere servitude. So that relates to our title, about being sincere, humble and sincere servitude. And then I really like the other line that says, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Because it kind of reminds me when something smells really good, and this might sound a little bit weird, but dive with me. There are some people that sometimes smell really good. I remember in my high school years, you know, I was a boy, so some girls smelled really good. They had very good perfume. You know, they walked through the hallway and you could smell that, or in the classroom, and you could really smell that. And so when the person entered, that perfume, you could smell it, and it filled the room, right? That's exactly what's happening here in this scene. This perfume that she has fills the room, but it's not only physically. If you think about it deeper, the reason that John is putting this line here is a little bit deeper than that, because it's a very regular line. Yeah, everybody can smell the perfume, but no, it fills the room. You know, it's a deeper word than that. So basically, not only physically, but spiritually, her action of humbleness is filling the room. You know, sometimes we think about people who are confident as the people who are able to capture attention, to capture the attention of other people, but sometimes it's humbleness that does that. Especially today's age when we have so many people who are trying to go viral and be confident and do a lot of different things. Sometimes humbleness is what we actually need to fill the room. And that's exactly what Mary is doing here. And it says, so when we continue in verse 4, but one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. And he said, why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was a year's wages. So Judas, you know, we see this beautiful scene from Mary showing servitude and humbleness to Jesus, and then Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, objects to it and says, wait a minute. This is a year's wages. This is very expensive. What are we doing here? And when you think about it, what he actually says is that he wants to give that to the poor. And now my question to you guys is that a bad thing to give to the poor? No, it's not. It's clearly a good thing. But Judas is actually wrong here for one main reason, and that is that he's actually not sincere about what he's saying. He has a double motive or an internal motive apart from what he's actually saying. And what is that? Well, that he's trying to make money. That's basically what he's trying to do, right? It says that his wages, he did not say this, and the author of the book of John is very clear about this. He said, he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, a keeper of the money bag. He used to help himself to what was put into it. So again, what Judas is actually thinking about here is about how much money he can make with this perfume. And that is the meme is a little bit about that, if you see it. It's all about Mary doing this very good thing, and then Judas is like, do you not know how to invest? It's a pretty funny joke, right? With the guy from Shark Tank. Come on. Yeah, thank you, Abby. So moving on, this is how Jesus responded to Judas. He says, "Leave her alone. Leave her alone," Jesus replied. "It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." So not only does Jesus rebuttal what Judas is saying here, but he mentions the reason why, and that is that he's soon going to die, right? We're talking about the Passover. When the time of the Passover comes closer, this is going to be the death of Jesus to be sacrificed for each one of us. And so what's being said here is that there's no other more important moment for this perfume to be used than that exact moment. You know, this is more valuable than anything else. So clearly, this is the right choice and the right moment to use this very expensive fragrance. And then we see a little bit of that, an example of that in verses 9 to 11 of the tensions building up between the people and Jesus, or the leaders of the religious leaders who want to kill Jesus. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priest made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. So what we see here is that we see the tension is starting to build up, right? And as we go into our next teaching, maybe next week, we're going to see what type of teaching we're going to do. But if we're going to stay in John, we're going to get closer and closer to the crucifixion of Jesus, to the sacrifice that he's going to do. So the tension is definitely building up. So I'm 100% excited to get into that. But now let's dive into the application for today in this story and what we can learn from it. So as we can see it up there, I have a couple of questions like we always do. And, you guys already know that kind of the purpose of the application is so that you can see this story and apply it to your life, to your daily life. But one of the things that happen, and this is a tendency that I usually have, and maybe you guys have it too, and that is that when you see a story like this, we usually like to put ourselves in the shoes of the hero, right? Who's the hero of this story, apart from Jesus? Who? Mary, right? Mary is the hero of this story, and sometimes we have the tendency to put ourselves in the shoes of Mary, which is a good thing, right? It's good to see her perspective. But sometimes we got to put ourselves in the shoes of the villain, which is Judas, right? Because we are also sinners like him. Sometimes we act just like Judas. So with that perspective, as I ask these questions, these rhetorical questions, just think about it. Think about it not only in the perspective of Mary, but in the perspectives of Judas, and try to be different from what Judas did. So the first and main question is, am I sincere or a shallow follower of God? And to be more practical, I have some smaller questions in the bottom. And it says, am I sincere when I serve? So am I sincere, for example, when I go to church and when I have the opportunity to serve? That might be communion. That might be in the AV. That might be with the kids in the Sunday school, worship, many other things, activities, many other forms of servitude. Are you actually sincere about it? Sincere from your heart, or are you doing it because your parents told you to do it? Because there's a sense of responsibility on it. It's not bad, but isn't it much better if you can actually be sincere about it, if you actually want to do it? For me, I've been preaching a lot here at the youth group, and even for those of you that saw me preaching for the first time in front of the church, you don't have to clap, but thank you. But one of the things that happens is that I might have the temptation to be looking for praises, right? I want to do good because I want people to tell me that I did good. right? And that's not what I want to be looking for. What I want to be looking for is just to share the gospel, to share the word of God. That should be my sincere thing from my heart, not to be looking for praises and for to be proud, right? So we got to think about that. Whenever we serve, are we doing it for a sincere reason? The second question, am I sincere when I give? So when I have the opportunity to give, just like Judas is talking about giving to the poor, am I doing it because of grace? Am I doing it because I actually want to be able to give that? Or am I doing it because there's something in return? Very important. Third question, am I sincere am I sincere privately? Or am I somebody who is a Christian externally? But when, the eyes are not looking at you, am I sincere? Am I actually a good Christian, a follower of God? We can be very good when we're in front of people, but what happens when nobody's looking at you? Very important. And finally, am I sincere when I pray? Sometimes it can become very, very practical to pray, and it doesn't come from the heart. So we got to be able to actually pray more and more often so that we can actually have a better connection with God in our prayer. So we need to pray better and more often from our hearts. So now, with that being said, oh my gosh, that's so loud. My glasses are falling off. With that being said, let's dive into a deep, sincere prayer right now as we finish the teaching.